The morning began before sunrise for Aisha. The small room she shared with her mother and younger brother was still dark, and the air was heavy with the smell of damp walls and old cooking oil. She rose quietly, careful not to wake them. Her brother lay curled on a thin mattress, his breathing shallow and uneven. Every breath he took reminded her of why she could not afford to be late, tired, or careless today. Aisha washed her face with cold water from a cracked plastic bucket. She tied her scarf neatly, even though it was faded from many washes. She checked her pocket twice to make sure her bus fare was there. Money was always counted more than once in her life. One small mistake could mean no dinner or no medicine or another night of worry. Outside, the street was already alive with noise. Vendors shouted, buses honked, and people hurried past her without looking. She blended into the crowd, another working woman with tired eyes and quiet hope. By the time she reached the bus stop, her feet already ached, but she stood patiently. Complaining had never helped her. The bus ride was long and crowded. She held onto a metal bar as people pushed in from every side. Her mind kept returning to her brother's cough from the night before. The doctor had warned her that without proper treatment, things could get worse. Aisha did not know where the money would come from. She believed that somehow she would find a way. When she finally reached the large gates of the mansion, the world seemed different. The street was cleaner, quieter. Tall walls surrounded the property, hiding green lawns and fountains inside. Every time Aisha walked through those gates, she felt like she was stepping into someone else's life that did not belong to her. She entered through the side door as she always did. The marble floors were cold under her worn shoes. Everything inside looked expensive and perfect, from the shining glass tables to the soft carpets that probably cost more than her yearly income. She tied her apron and began her work without delay. Cleaning was something Aisha took seriously. She wiped every surface carefully, afraid of making a mistake. Other staff members moved around her, some kind, some distant. She rarely spoke unless spoken to. Being invisible felt safer. The owner of the house, Mr. Karim, was not someone she had spoken to often. Everyone knew him as a powerful businessman, respected and feared in equal measure. He was rarely home, and when he was, his presence changed the air in the house. People walked faster, spoke softer. That morning, Aisha did not know he was home. She was asked to clean the main sitting room, a place she usually avoided because of its delicate items. She carried a tray with cups of coffee for a small meeting that had just ended. Her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from fear of doing something wrong. As she stepped forward, her foot caught the edge of a rug. Time slowed. The tray tilted, and before she could stop it, one cup fell. Dark coffee spilled across the cream-colored carpet, spreading quickly like a stain that could not be undone. For a moment, there was silence. Aisha stared at the floor, her heart pounding. She dropped to her knees, trying to blot the stain with her apron, but it only spread more. Her mind raced. That carpet alone could cost more than her entire life. She felt someone standing behind her. Slowly, she turned her head and saw Mr. Karim. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. The room felt smaller, heavier. Other staff members froze, unsure whether to step in or step away. Aisha's hands began to shake. She stood up quickly, tears filling her eyes before she could stop them. Words poured out of her mouth in a rush. She begged him not to fire her. She apologized again and again, her voice breaking. She spoke about her family, about needing the job, about having no one else to depend on. She did not plan to say all those things. They came out because the fear inside her had nowhere else to go. Tears ran down her face, and she made no effort to hide them. Pride had no place in moments like this. Mr. Karim listened without interrupting. He looked at the carpet, then back at her. He had seen many people cry before, but something about her desperation was different. It was not an act. It was not for attention. It came from a place of deep worry and exhaustion. The room waited for his reaction. Finally, he spoke in a calm voice. He told her to stop crying. He said the carpet could be replaced. His words were simple, but to Aisha, they felt unreal. He did not fire her. Instead, he asked her name. When she answered softly, He nodded once and told her to clean herself and return to work. Then he walked away. Aisha stood there, shocked. Her legs felt weak, and she had to hold onto a chair to steady herself. The other workers looked at her with surprise. Some whispered. She barely heard them. Her heart was still racing, but now with relief instead of fear. She went to the washroom, splashed water on her face, and took deep breaths. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red, her face tired, but she was still standing. She whispered a quiet thank you, not knowing exactly who she was thanking, as she returned to her duties. She noticed something strange. Mr. Karim, who usually ignored the staff, glanced at her once more as he passed through the hallway. It was brief, but it felt different, like he was seeing her for the first time. Aisha did not think much of it. Her mind was already back on her work and her worries at home. She finished her shift and left the mansion as the sun began to set. The bus ride back felt longer, and her body ached with tiredness. When she reached home, her brother greeted her with a weak smile. Her mother asked about her day. Aisha only said it was long. She did not want to add more worry to their lives. That night, as she lay down on the thin mattress, she replayed the moment in the sitting room again and again. She knew how close she had come to losing everything. She also knew that kindness, when it appeared, could change the direction of a life. In another part of the city, Mr. Karim sat alone in his study. The image of the crying maid returned to his thoughts unexpectedly. He had seen fear before, but this had been something else. It stayed with him, long after the coffee stain was cleaned and forgotten. Neither of them knew that this small accident, this moment of tears and mercy, had quietly opened the door to a truth that would soon change both their lives. The next few days passed quietly, but something had changed, even if Aisha could not fully explain it. She returned to the mansion every morning with the same routine, the same tired body, and the same worries waiting at home. Yet inside her, there was a new feeling. It was not hope exactly, but it was not fear either. It felt like being seen, even if only for a moment. She worked as she always did, careful and silent. She avoided the main sitting room where the accident had happened, her heart still tightening whenever she passed near it. No one mentioned the spilled coffee again. The carpet had been replaced, and life in the mansion moved on, as if nothing had happened. But Aisha noticed small things. She noticed that the house supervisor no longer scolded her as harshly. She noticed that her work schedule became a little more stable, with fewer sudden changes. These were small mercies, but in her world, small mercies mattered. At home, life was becoming harder. Her brother's cough grew worse at night. Sometimes he struggled to catch his breath, and Aisha would sit beside him, rubbing his back until he fell asleep. Her mother tried to stay strong, but Aisha could see the fear in her eyes. The medicine they were buying was not helping much anymore. One evening, after a long shift, Aisha took her brother to the local clinic again. The doctor looked tired as he read the old reports. He spoke gently, but honestly. The treatment they needed was beyond what the small clinic could offer. It would require tests, proper medicine, and time. All of it cost money. Aisha nodded, even though her chest felt tight. She had heard similar words before. She thanked the doctor and walked home slowly, holding her brother's hand. That night, she barely slept. Her mind kept counting numbers that never added up back at the mansion. Mr. Karim was also restless, though, for very different reasons. He found himself distracted during meetings, his thoughts drifting when they should not. He brushed it off at first, blaming stress. But the image of the crying maid returned again and again. He had built his life on control. Every decision he made was based on logic and numbers. Emotions were things he believed could be managed or ignored. Yet something about that moment in the sitting room had stayed with him. It bothered him because it did not fit into any clear category. One afternoon, while reviewing household expenses and staff files, his eyes paused on a name, Aisha. He remembered her voice when she had said it. Quiet, respectful, afraid. He asked his assistant for more information without giving a reason. It was a simple request, something he had done many times before. Still, he felt an unusual tension as he waited. The information came back later that day. It was brief. Age, address, family details. Employment history? Nothing unusual at first glance. But as he read further, his expression changed. Her brother's medical notes were included, attached because of a previous charity request that had never reached his desk. Chronic illness. Worsening condition. Financial hardship. The words were plain, but their meaning was heavy. For a long moment, Mr. Karim stared at the file. The crying made sense now. The fear, the desperation. It had not been about the carpet at all. It had been about survival. He leaned back in his chair, something shifting inside him. He had seen many requests for help over the years. Most of them were numbers on paper, faces he would never meet. But this time, the face already lived in his memory. He did not act immediately. That was not his way. Instead, he began to observe. Over the next few days, he noticed Aisha more than he ever had before. Not in an obvious way, but quietly. He saw how she stayed late to finish her work properly. He saw how she helped another maid who was struggling without being asked. He saw how she kept her head down, never demanding attention. Once, he passed by the kitchen and heard her laughing softly at something another worker said. The sound surprised him. It was light, despite everything she was carrying. Aisha, unaware of these silent observations, continued her life as usual. Each day felt like a test of endurance. She skipped meals to save money. She sold a small piece of jewelry that had belonged to her late father. Still, it was not enough. One morning, she received a call from the clinic while she was at work. Her brother had been brought in after a bad episode. Her hands shook as she listened. She asked for permission to leave early, her voice trembling. The supervisor hesitated, then nodded. As Aisha rushed out, she did not see Mr. Karim standing at the end of the hallway. He watched her leave, her face pale with worry. Something tightened in his chest. That evening, he made a decision he had not planned to make. He reviewed his company's charity programs again, this time personally. He asked questions. He changed procedures. Quietly, without announcements, Aisha spent the night at the clinic, sitting beside her brother's bed. She held his hand and whispered stories to distract him from the pain. Her mother slept sitting up in a chair, exhausted. In the early hours of the morning, Aisha stepped outside the clinic for some air. She looked up at the sky, dark and endless. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to cry again. Not loudly. Just enough to let the weight out. She did not know that help was closer than she thought. She did not know that a man who had once seen her as just another worker was now unable to forget her face. Back in his quiet study, Mr. Karim stared at the city lights from his window. He told himself he was only doing what was reasonable. But deep down, he knew this was something else. Two lives were moving toward each other again. Slowly and silently, shaped by worry, responsibility, and a truth that had finally been seen. The next week brought a crisis that Aisha had been dreading. Her brother's condition worsened, and the small clinic could do little beyond providing temporary relief. One morning, she received a call from the doctor, urging her to bring him in immediately for further tests. The urgency in the voice left no room for delay. Aisha felt panic rising like a storm inside her. She finished her morning chores quickly, barely tasting the small breakfast she had managed to prepare. Her mother helped her lift her brother into their old rickety car. Every bump on the road made her heart ache as she watched his fragile body. Her mind raced with numbers, costs, and the impossibility of the bills they could never afford at the clinic. Aisha stayed by his side, holding his hand tightly. The machines and tests seemed overwhelming, and she felt helpless. Every passing hour felt heavier than the last. The doctors explained the treatment needed, the medications, the surgeries, and the care. The total cost was more than she had ever seen in her life. She swallowed her fear, trying to think clearly, but the reality was crushing. She left the clinic for a moment to make a phone call, her fingers trembling as she dialed numbers she knew wouldn't help. Friends, relatives, neighbors, they all shook their heads, unable to lend the amount needed. The hopelessness was almost unbearable, and she returned to her brother's side with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Mr. Karim had been observing quietly. He had made inquiries about Isa's situation, without revealing his intentions. He had learned enough to know that her brother's condition was serious and that she was struggling desperately. The sight of her tears and exhaustion lingered in his mind. Urging him to act, he decided to speak with his assistant privately, setting in motion plans to provide discreet support. He wanted to help without embarrassing Aisha, without making her feel dependent. But he also knew that direct help might be unavoidable if her situation became more urgent. Aisha returned home late that evening, exhausted from the clinic and worry. Her mother looked at her with concern, and her brother lay quietly on the mattress. She made a small dinner, but her appetite was gone. She sat beside her brother, holding him close and whispering comfort despite her own fear. That night, sleep came fitfully. Every sound seemed louder, every cough from her brother a sharp reminder of the stakes. She dreamed of being trapped in a room with walls closing in, unable to reach her family. She woke with a start, shaking and crying silently, not wanting to wake her mother. The following day, she returned to work at the mansion, her mind still heavy with worry. She tried to focus on her chores, but everything felt distant. She wiped tables and polished floors, her hands moving automatically, her thoughts far away. The mansion's opulence seemed even more distant, almost unreal, compared to the fragile reality of her family as she carried a tray of cups to the sitting room. She accidentally knocked one over. This time, it was nothing serious, but her heart raced anyway. She muttered an apology, expecting the usual scolding. But this time, a calm voice stopped her. It was Mr. Karim. He asked her to sit down. Surprised and cautious, she obeyed. He did not mention the spilled cup. Instead, he asked about her family, gently, quietly, as if trying not to push her away. Aissa's eyes widened, unsure how to respond. She hesitated, then slowly began to explain the situation with her brother. She spoke softly, tears forming again, telling him about the clinic, the treatments, the bills they could not pay. She did not expect a response beyond polite sympathy. Yet she felt the weight of his attention. Mr. Karim listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. His calm presence somehow gave her strength to speak. When she finished, she braced herself for judgment or dismissal. Instead, Mr. Karim leaned back and said nothing for a long moment. Then he asked quietly if she trusted him. The question surprised her, but before she could answer, he reassured her that he wanted to help. He promised that her brother would receive the care he needed, and that she would not have to carry this burden alone. Aisha's hands shook. She wanted to protest, to refuse, but she could not. The tears fell freely now, relief mixing with fear and disbelief. She had never expected help from someone so distant from her world. Mr. Karim's words were simple, but to her, they felt like a lifeline thrown across a vast, stormy sea. In the days that followed, Mr. Karim arranged for her brother's treatment. She received calls from the hospital, confirming appointments, medications, and procedures. Every detail was handled quietly, without fanfare, allowing her to focus on her family rather than the impossible logistics. Aisha noticed subtle changes in the mansion as well. Mr. Karim would sometimes glance her way, a small, unspoken acknowledgement of her presence. It was not familiarity or friendliness in the usual sense, but it carried a weight that made her feel seen. She could not explain it, but it made her chest lighter amidst the ongoing struggle. At home, her brother gradually began to respond to treatment. His cough eased and he slept more peacefully. Aisha could feel a tiny spark of hope reigniting, though she remained cautious. Life had taught her to guard against expectations that could shatter so quickly. One evening, after finishing her work at the mansion, she received a call from the hospital. They informed her that the first round of treatments had been successful, but further care would be needed. Aisha cried quietly, holding the phone against her chest. Relief and gratitude mingled in her heart, along with the knowledge that the journey was not over. That night, she sat with her mother, recounting the day's events. Her mother listened silently, a soft smile on her face. They shared a quiet meal, the kind that was filled with small joys, not abundance. It was a night of hope, fragile but real. Meanwhile, Mr. Karim reviewed the hospital reports himself. He saw her strength, her dedication, and her courage reflected in every line of the medical updates. Something about her perseverance, her quiet dignity in the face of overwhelming challenges, resonated deeply with him. He realized that he had underestimated the depth of her resilience. Though their worlds were separate, both Aisha and Mr. Karim were changing. She was beginning to feel that help was possible, and he was beginning to understand that human struggle was more profound than numbers and appearances. Their lives were moving closer together, bound by circumstance, courage, and a truth that neither could ignore. The days following her brother's treatment brought a subtle change in Aiha's life. She noticed small signs of relief and hope that she had not felt in years. Her brother could laugh more easily, and her mother no longer appeared as worn down by worry. Yet Aisha remained cautious. The struggle had been long and unforgiving, and she had learned not to assume that ease would last. At the mansion, Mr. Karim quietly continued to keep an eye on Ayasa's life. He had arranged for her brother's care, ensuring that treatments were ongoing and that her family had the support they needed. What he had not expected was the effect it would have on Aisha herself. He noticed her confidence growing slowly, her posture straighter, her eyes carrying a glimmer of determination that had been absent before. Aisha returned to the mansion each morning, now able to work without the constant anxiety that had once weighed her down. She carried herself with a quiet dignity, moving through her chores with careful attention, yet there was a subtle lightness in her movements that had not been there before. She still respected the hierarchy, still kept her head low, but there was a newfound sense of assurance in her steps. The staff began to notice the change as well. Other maids looked to her with quiet admiration, noticing how she managed her work while still caring for her family. Some even asked her advice, and Aisha shared her small wisdom without pride, gently guiding them as she had been guided in life. She had grown resilient not only in spirit but in ability. It was evident to those around her. Mr. Karim watched all of this unfold from a distance. He had not sought acknowledgement, nor did he intervene openly. Instead, he observed, quietly appreciating the depth of her character. He found himself drawn to her, not because of her circumstances, but because of the courage and compassion she displayed. It was rare to see someone handle hardship with such quiet strength, and it intrigued him. One afternoon, he asked his assistant to arrange a meeting with Aisha in a private room. Not as an employer, but as someone willing to speak candidly. Aisha was nervous when she entered. She had never been called to a room alone with him before, and the weight of expectation pressed down on her chest. She bowed her head politely, her hands folded in front of her. Mr. Karim did not begin with business or instructions. Instead, he spoke directly about her family, about her brother's progress, and about the care he had arranged. Aisa's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and gratitude filling her expression. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words felt insufficient. He noticed her hesitation and spoke gently. He told her that her dedication had not gone unnoticed, that her resilience and hard work had impressed him deeply. Aisha felt a rush of emotions, pride, humility, and a strange warmth she could not name. She had spent so long feeling invisible that to be recognized, even quietly, shook something inside her. From that moment, their interactions changed subtly. Mr. Karim began to include her in small decisions regarding the household that she had previously been unaware of. He sought her opinion on practical matters, showing respect for her experience. Aisha felt both honored and cautious, aware that this was unusual, yet grateful for the trust he was extending. Meanwhile, at home, her family's life began to stabilize. Her brother's health continued to improve, and her mother's smile became more frequent. They could afford better food and medicine, and small joys returned to their modest home. Aisha worked tirelessly to manage her responsibilities, balancing her job at the mansion with her duties at home, but now she felt a little less burdened, a little more capable. The bond between her and Mr. Karim grew slowly. It was subtle, built on shared moments and quiet understanding rather than words. He respected her privacy and her independence, while she began to trust that his help came without judgment. They were from different worlds, yet a connection was forming based on mutual respect and understanding. One rainy evening, as Aisha returned from work, she found Mr. Karim waiting at the gates. The rain had soaked her clothes, but he did not comment. Instead, he handed her a small umbrella and insisted she use it. The gesture was simple, yet it conveyed care in a way words could not. She accepted with a shy nod, a warmth spreading through her chest that she did not fully understand. Over time, Aisha began to notice subtle ways in which her life was changing. Opportunities she had never imagined were opening up educational programs for her brother, support for her family, and eventually, even a small role in managing certain aspects of the mansion. Each step forward was accompanied by a growing confidence, a sense that she could navigate a world that had once seemed impossible to enter. Mr. Karim, for his part, found himself reflecting more on human connections than on business deals. He had always valued efficiency, results, and control, but watching Aisha had shifted something inside him. Her courage, her kindness, and her unwavering commitment to her family had reminded him that wealth and power were meaningless without compassion and understanding. As weeks passed, Aisha's presence in the mansion became more than just a maid performing her duties. She was someone whose opinions and insights mattered, whose resilience inspired others, and whose humanity was impossible to ignore. She carried herself with quiet pride, still humble, still aware of her past struggles, but no longer defined by them. Mr. Karim began to take small steps to ensure she had a stable future. He encouraged her to pursue training and education, offering opportunities that were once unimaginable. He remained a careful observer, never forcing his influence, but allowing her growth to happen naturally. Aisha responded with diligence and gratitude, her confidence blossoming with each passing day. Their worlds, once divided by wealth and circumstance, were gradually finding a fragile balance. Aisha was learning to navigate new responsibilities and opportunities. Kun was learning to value compassion and resilience as much as success. The mansion, once a place of distant authority and fear, was now a space where respect, understanding, and quiet connection were taking root in these moments. Both Aisha and Mr. Karim began to realize that life could change in unexpected ways. One act of kindness, one decision to notice someone, could ripple outward, transforming lives in ways neither could have anticipated. They were bound by circumstances, yet also by something deeper, an unspoken recognition of courage, dignity, and humanity that transcended wealth and social status. Aisha's family continued to thrive, her brother growing stronger, her mother more at ease, and she herself finding a sense of stability she had never known. The mansion became a place not only of work, but of possibility, a place where she could begin to imagine a future beyond survival. And for Mr. Karim, the experience was a reminder that the human spirit, when met with compassion and respect, could inspire change even in the most unexpected hearts. Slowly, carefully, their lives intertwined in quiet, meaningful ways, and while the future remained uncertain, both Aisha and Mr. Karim understood that they had each found something invaluable: trust, respect, and the beginnings of a bond that could endure beyond circumstance. Months passed, and Aisha's life continued to change in ways she had never imagined. Her brother was healthier, her mother's laughter returned more frequently, and her own confidence grew steadily. She was no longer just a maid working silently in a mansion. She had become a presence that others noticed and respected. Her responsibilities had increased, and with them came opportunities she had never dreamed of. She began to manage small aspects of the household, organize schedules, and even assist in supervising some of the staff. Each day brought a new challenge, and she faced them with courage that had been tested and strengthened over time. Despite the changes, Aisha remained humble. She never flaunted her improved circumstances, never boasted about the support she had received. Instead, she focused on her family and her work, quietly building a life that was more stable and secure than it had ever been. She understood the value of hard work, sacrifice, and integrity because she had lived every moment of struggle firsthand. Mr. Karim, for his part, continued to observe and support her quietly. He had learned much from watching her resilience and compassion. His life, once dominated by business and numbers, had begun to shift. He found himself appreciating small acts of kindness, noticing courage where he had once seen weakness, an understanding that wealth and power were meaningless without empathy. One day, he asked Aisha to come to his study for a private meeting. She entered cautiously, bowing her head respectfully. Mr. Karim greeted her warmly, a rare softness in his demeanor that surprised her. He spoke not of chores or schedules, but of her growth and achievements. He acknowledged the hard work she had put into both her family's well-being and her duties at the mansion. Aisha felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had never expected recognition, and yet here it was. It's offered sincerely and without conditions. He then spoke about the future. He explained that he wanted to provide her with opportunities beyond the mansion, to ensure that she could build a life for herself and her family that would not be dependent on anyone's mercy. He offered her access to education, training, and resources to explore her potential. Aisha listened, tears welling in her eyes. Knowing that this was more than charity, was trust, respect, and belief in her abilities. Over the following months, Aisha embraced these opportunities. She attended classes in management, learned about finances, and began to develop skills that would open doors she had never thought possible. She still worked at the mansion, but now her role had evolved into something meaningful and empowering. The staff respected her not only for her diligence, but for her wisdom and guidance. She became a quiet leader, someone others could look up to, someone who had endured hardship yet remained compassionate and strong. Her family's life also improved significantly. Her brother excelled in school, his health fully restored. Her mother could rest more, enjoying simple pleasures without constant worry. Aisha's sacrifices, once so heavy, now felt lighter, supported by a system that valued her and her family's well-being. Each day was still filled with effort, but there was a sense of hope that had been absent for so long. Mr. Karim continued to play a subtle role in her life. He did not impose, he did not demand, but he remained a constant presence, offering guidance, support, and encouragement when needed. Over time, Aisha began to understand him not just as a wealthy employer, but as someone who had recognized her humanity and responded with empathy. Their interactions became a blend of professional respect and genuine understanding. They shared moments of quiet conversation, laughter, and reflection. Each learned from the other, bridging the gap between their worlds. The community around Aisha began to notice the changes as well. Neighbors saw her confidence, her ability to manage responsibilities, and her kindness toward others. Stories of her journey spread quietly, inspiring those who faced similar struggles. People admired not only her resilience, but the grace with which she carried herself. She became a symbol of hope, a reminder that courage and determination, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, could change lives. One evening, as Aisha returned from work, she reflected on her journey. The streets she walked now seemed less intimidating, the world less hostile. She had faced despair and emerged stronger, guided by her love for her family and her unwavering determination. She realized that her life was no longer defined by poverty or struggle, but by the choices she had made, the courage she had shown, and the opportunities she had embraced in the mansion. Mr. Karim watched from his study window. He thought about the young maid he had first seen crying over a spilled cup of coffee. She had transformed not only her life, but had, in subtle ways, transformed his own understanding of what mattered. Her courage, compassion, and resilience had left a mark on him that went beyond admiration. It had inspired reflection, humility, a deeper appreciation for human connection. The story of Aisha, once a poor maid begging in tears, had become a tale of transformation, hope, and empowerment. It was a testament to the power of kindness, understanding, and the belief that every person, regardless of circumstance, held potential that could flourish when met with respect and opportunity. Her journey reminded everyone around her that courage and integrity were invaluable, and that small acts of empathy could ripple outward to change lives in profound ways. Aisha's life had been forever altered. Not by chance alone, but by the courage she had shown and the trust she had earned. She had moved from survival to stability, from despair to hope, and from invisibility to recognition. The mansion, once a place of fear and hierarchy, had become a stage for transformation. learning, and quiet empowerment. In the end, both Aisha and Mr. Kareem had discovered something invaluable. She had discovered her own strength, her ability to rise above circumstances, and the importance of compassion and courage. He had discovered the power of empathy, the depth of human resilience, the transformative impact of recognizing and supporting potential. Their lives, once separate, had intertwined in ways that created lasting change, leaving a legacy of hope, respect, and inspiration for those who would follow. Time moved on, and Aisha's life had transformed in ways she had once only dreamed of. She now walked with quiet confidence, her eyes clear with purpose, and her heart lighter from the burdens she had carried for so long. Her brother was thriving at school, healthy and spirited, while her mother's laughter filled their home. The once overwhelming worries that had dominated her days had softened, placed with a sense of stability and hope that had felt impossible not long ago. Her role at the mansion had evolved as well. No longer simply performing chores, she now managed schedules, coordinated staff, and handled household responsibilities that required judgment, decision-making, and leadership. The other staff members looked up to her, not only for her competence, but for the grace with which she carried her new responsibilities. Aisha had become a quiet leader, someone whose experience and wisdom guided others, and her influence within the household was quietly recognized by everyone. Even Mr. Kareem noticed. His interactions with her had grown from distant observation to subtle mentorship. He spoke to her with respect, listened to her insights, and offered guidance when appropriate. Over time, their conversations shifted from practicality and duty to more personal topics or hopes, her experiences and reflections on the journey that had brought her to this point. These exchanges were gentle, supportive, and sincere, forging a bond that transcended employer-employee dynamics. Despite the progress, life still presented challenges. Aisha had to balance her duties at the mansion with her responsibilities to her family. Some days were exhausting, her energy stretched thin, yet she met each day with determination. She reminded herself that every effort mattered not only for her family, but for the person she was becoming. Every small victory, whether a successful day at work or a breakthrough in her brother's studies, reinforced her belief that perseverance was its own reward. One rainy afternoon, she received news from the school that her brother had excelled in his exams, earning recognition for his hard work and dedication. Tears welled in her eyes as she shared the news with her mother. They embraced a simple gesture, loaded with gratitude, relief, and pride. It was a reminder that their struggles, while difficult, had led to tangible and meaningful progress. Meanwhile, Mr. Kareem quietly continued to support her family. He had arranged for educational opportunities and ensured that their living conditions remained secure. He did not seek acknowledgement or gratitude, preferring to assist in ways that respected their independence. Yet, Aisha gradually recognized the scope of his involvement and felt both gratitude and humility. She understood that while her courage had earned his respect, his support had made a crucial difference in her family's well-being. Aisha's confidence in managing her life, her family, and her responsibilities at the mansion grew daily. She discovered strengths she had never realized she possessed: patience, problem-solving, resilience, and leadership. Her past struggles had honed these abilities, giving her a perspective that was both practical and compassionate. She began mentoring newer staff members, offering guidance and encouragement, and her influence expanded quietly but effectively. Mr. Kareem, observing this growth, felt a deep sense of satisfaction and reflection. He had seen countless individuals in his life, but Aisha's transformation was unique. Her courage, empathy, and determination reminded him of the human capacity to endure and thrive despite adversity. He found himself inspired not by wealth, power, or success, but by resilience, character, and integrity. The mansion itself had become more than a place of work. It was now a space where trust, learning, and human connection could flourish. Aisha's presence brought warmth, diligence, and authenticity to the household. Her journey from desperation to empowerment influenced everyone around her, quietly setting a standard for perseverance and integrity. One evening, as she finished her duties and prepared to leave the mansion, Mr. Karim requested her presence in his study. She entered with her usual humility, but this time there was a sense of anticipation in the air. He smiled gently, gesturing for her to sit. He began by acknowledging the remarkable journey she had undertaken, her hard work, courage, and growth. Aisha listened quietly, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He then spoke of the future, offering opportunities for continued growth, education, and leadership. These were not mere gifts, but a recognition of her abilities and potential. He emphasized that her dedication and integrity had earned him trust and admiration, and that he wished to support her in building a life that was independent, stable, and fulfilling. Aisha's eyes filled with tears once more, but this time they were tears of joy, not desperation. In the weeks and months that followed, Aisha embraced these opportunities with enthusiasm. She pursued education and training, expanding her skills and knowledge. She began to envision a future beyond her previous limitations, a life where her family thrived, where she could contribute meaningfully, and where her potential was no longer confined by circumstance. Each day brought new challenges, but she faced them with the resilience and courage that had been forged through years of struggle. Her relationship with Mr. Karim deepened, based not on dependence, but on mutual respect, understanding, and shared recognition of each other's humanity. Their conversations ranged from practical guidance to reflections on life, work, and personal growth. Each exchange strengthened a bond built on authenticity, trust, and the understanding that true value lay in character, empathy, and integrity. The wider community began to notice the transformation as well. Stories of Aisha's perseverance, courage, and success circulated quietly, inspiring others who faced similar hardships. She became a symbol of hope and resilience, a living example that determination, integrity, and compassion could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. At home, life continued to flourish. Her brother excelled academically and socially. Her mother enjoyed a sense of security and peace, and Aisha herself grew in confidence, competence, and self-assurance. The hardships of the past were no longer shackles, but reminders of her strength and capacity to endure. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Aisha reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The streets she walked each day, once intimidating and harsh, now felt familiar and navigable. The mansion, once a place of fear and hierarchy, had become a space of growth, opportunity, and respect. She realized that her life had transformed, not by chance, but by courage, determination, and the support of those who recognized and nurtured her potential. Mr. Karim, observing the world outside his study window, reflected on the young maid he had first encountered in tears. He marveled at her journey and the resilience she had shown. In guiding and supporting her, he had also learned lessons about humanity, empathy, and the transformative power of recognition and respect. Aisha's story, once defined by poverty, desperation, and struggle, had become a testament to hope, perseverance, and the capacity for human growth. Her journey highlighted the importance of compassion, integrity, and courage, inspiring all who witnessed it. She had moved from a place of despair to one of empowerment, stability, and influence, creating a legacy of resilience and strength. Ultimately, both Aisha and Mr. Karim discovered something invaluable. She had discovered her own courage, potential, and the power of perseverance. He had discovered the impact of empathy, the depth of human resilience, and the profound importance of recognizing and supporting potential in others. Their lives, once separate and defined by circumstance, intertwined in ways that created lasting change, leaving a legacy of hope, empowerment, and inspiration for everyone who heard their story.